My name is Evelyn Harrow. I'm 67. That night, the air in Charleston smelled faintly of salt and magnolia, the way it always does after a long day of celebration. The streetlight above me buzzed, its glow flickering across the cracked sidewalk. I stood there in my pale blue dress, the one Daniel once said made me look graceful for my age. My shoes pinched, but I kept them on. It felt wrong to take them off when the night was still supposed to belong to him. He thought it would be easier if I waited there while he handled the crowd, not realizing how small it made me feel. After the reception, "Mom, just wait at the bus stop," he'd said earlier, a quick kiss on my cheek before disappearing into a crowd of sequins and laughter. I'd nodded as if that were perfectly reasonable, as if mothers always waited at bus stops in wedding clothes. Now the reception music had faded into the city hum. A few cars swept past, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Each pair of headlights made me straighten a little, brush invisible dust from my skirt. But they never slowed. I glanced at the small white box beside me, the gift I'd wrapped that morning. Neat corners, a silver ribbon. Inside was an old pocket watch that once belonged to his father. I'd planned to give it to him after dinner, when things were quiet. The hours stretched thin. A boy on a bicycle passed, earbuds in, never looking my way. The street smelled of gasoline and something fried from the diner across the road. I shifted on the bench, the wood damp beneath my palms. My phone battery blinked red, then died. It was nearly midnight when the last bus rattled by, empty. Its brake lights glowed for a moment, then vanished down the hill. The silence afterward was so complete, it made my chest ache. I waited another hour, because that's what mothers do. They give time the benefit of the doubt. When I finally stood, my knees stiff, I knew he wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not in the ways that mattered. I picked up the gift, brushed off a speck of dirt, and began the slow walk home beneath the sleeping city. By the time I reached my porch, the sky had begun to lighten over the river. I still had the box in my hands. When I got home, the house was too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't wait to be broken. I slipped off my shoes by the door and set the gift box on the counter. The silver ribbon looked out of place under the kitchen light, too festive, too hopeful. I plugged in my phone, watching the black screen flicker to life. Messages and notifications flooded in, a digital chorus of things I hadn't been part of. One photo stopped me cold. The photo must have been taken earlier, yet seeing it now felt like a second rejection, his hand resting proudly on her waist. The caption, written by one of her bridesmaids, read, "A perfect night, just family." The words blurred for a second before sharpening again. I zoomed in, scanning faces I'd known for years, Kara's parents, her brothers, even Daniel's old friends from school. Everyone was there, everyone except me. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then tapped it back awake just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. My chair at the reception table was empty, not forgotten in the corner, simply missing. I'd been written out neatly, like an edit made before printing. A cold draft slipped through the kitchen window, brushing against my arms. I thought of the hours I'd spent sewing the hem of that blue dress, baking shortbread for the dessert table, making sure everything looked effortless. I had wanted the night to be beautiful for him, for both of them. I scrolled again, another photo, another laugh, another caption that began with "we" and ended with "family." I set the phone down and pressed my palms to the counter until my knuckles went white. Somewhere between those pictures and the long, empty street I had just walked, something in me shifted quietly, permanently. I didn't sleep that night. The house seemed smaller somehow, as if every room had absorbed the silence I carried home. When the first light crept through the blinds, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the rising steam. It reminded me of mornings long ago, back when everything was harder, but simpler. Daniel was only 6 when his father died. A dock accident on the Cooper River one moment he was there. The next, he was a name on a report. I remember standing at the pier with a borrowed coat and a heart full of questions no one could answer. People brought casseroles, promised to check in, and then the world went on without us. I worked double shifts at the hospital, sometimes 3 if someone called out sick. The pay was barely enough, but I made it stretch. I sold my engagement ring the year Daniel needed braces. I pawned the gold earrings Tom had given me on our 5th anniversary to buy his first set of textbooks for college. When the scholarship didn't cover his last semester, I withdrew the small savings I'd built for emergencies. "I'll pay you back," he'd said, grinning. I told him he didn't have to. Watching him walk across that graduation stage had been payment enough. I still remember the suit he wore that day, navy blue, a little too tight in the shoulders because I'd sewn it myself. He hugged me afterward, smelling of starch and triumph, and whispered, "You did it, Mom." For years, I carried that moment like a medal pinned to my chest. Now, thinking back, it feels like something borrowed, something that never fully belonged to me. The pride I'd claimed had been rented on credit I didn't know would come due. The boy I built my life around had become someone polished, successful, untouchable. I took another sip of tea, the taste bitter at the bottom. The sunlight hit the photo on the fridge, Daniel in his wedding tux, smiling with the same dimples that once meant home. I looked away before the ache could deepen. As the days passed, I began to see the wedding night for what it was, not a single act of cruelty, but the final stitch in a long, quiet pattern. It had been there all along, hidden under the small talk and polite smiles. I remembered the Christmas he canceled last minute because Kara's parents had already planned something. The birthday call that came a week late, wedged between meetings. The Mother's Day card he sent without signing his name, just, "Love, us." I'd told myself he was busy, that young families had their own rhythm. Then there were the conversations that ended before they began. If I tried to tell him about my day, he'd say, "You worry too much," or "You're too emotional, Mom." The words were always soft, never angry, but they built walls just the same. I learned to keep things short, pleasant, safe. Once, I overheard him on the phone, telling someone, "She means well. She's just a bit much sometimes." I laughed it off when he noticed me, said I didn't mind. But I did. I minded every time. Now, sitting alone in the kitchen, I realized none of it had been harmless. Each missed visit, each half-hearted apology, each small redirection away from my presence, they'd all led here. To a bus stop under a flickering light, where my place in his life had quietly expired. The silence between us wasn't sudden. It had been growing roots for years, and I had mistaken them for patience. Each missed call, each overlooked invitation, each casual dismissal had planted those roots quietly. The morning after the storm broke in me, I woke with a strange steadiness. The house was still, the kind of stillness that waits to be filled with purpose. I brewed coffee, black and bitter, and walked to the dining room. The sideboard against the wall had belonged to my mother. Heavy oak, drawers that stuck if you didn't pull them just right. Inside were the things I kept organized for comfort: old tax returns, bank letters, neatly folded records of a life built one small payment at a time. I opened the bottom drawer and paused. The scent of old paper rose up like memory itself. Each envelope had a name written in my handwriting, careful, slanted letters. Daniel College, Daniel Car Loan, Daniel Apartment Deposit, Daniel Wedding Fund, the oldest one, yellowed at the edges, held receipts from his first semester at Clemson. I traced the ink as if it could explain who I used to be. I spread them across the table. Tuition payments, rent transfers, insurance cosigns, even the deposit for the house he now shared with Kara. My name appeared on every line, like a ghost quietly underwriting his life. I began adding the numbers on a notepad, my fingers shaking with each total. The sum climbed 12,000, 40, then past 100,000. I'd always kept the records in pieces, never adding them together. Seeing the full total was a shock to the system I had trusted for decades. By the time I reached the most recent check, my breath caught. 182,000, give or take. I leaned back and laughed. A sound caught somewhere between disbelief and grief. I funded my own goodbye. I whispered, for years. I'd told myself I was helping him build stability, that love meant making sure he never struggled the way I had. I thought the ledger was proof of devotion, not dependency. But looking at those envelopes now, I saw something else, a lifetime of giving that had quietly erased me from the equation. The morning light shifted through the blinds, laying thin stripes across the table. The papers glowed pale gold, almost beautiful in their precision. I stacked them carefully, then pressed my palms flat on the surface, grounding myself in the weight of what I'd built. There it was, my life reduced to records. Every line a story of love given freely and never returned. The next morning, I dressed carefully, as if for an appointment that mattered. A pale linen blouse, pressed slacks, low shoes. The air outside was warm already, the kind that clings to your skin before noon. I walked the 6 blocks to Palmetto Credit Union, past the bakery where Daniel used to beg for muffins when he was small. Inside, the bank smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish. The young teller greeted me with the bright politeness they save for older women they assume are harmless. Her name tag read, Rita. How can I help you today? Mrs. Harrow, I'd like to review all my active transfers. I said. My voice was steady, but the words felt heavier than they should. She nodded and began typing. The printer hummed, spitting out a list of every automatic payment tied to my account. 3 pages, neatly stapled. I took the papers to a small consultation table by the window and read each line slowly. Mortgage assistance, insurance premiums, credit card payments, the monthly transfer for Daniel's home equity loan. When I looked up, Rita was waiting. I'd like to cancel these, I said, pointing to the list. All of them. She hesitated. All of them. Yes. Except for 2, the college fund for my granddaughter Lena, and the monthly donation to the animal shelter. Rita had to confirm each cancellation individually, the process slower than I liked. But each deletion felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. Rita's eyes softened as she took the papers. Are you sure? I smiled. The kind that feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. It's time. She typed quietly, the keyboard clicking like rain, with every entry she deleted. Something inside me loosened. When she handed back the confirmation forms, I signed them without pause. Walking out into the Charleston sunlight, I felt the breeze off the harbor lift a strand of hair against my cheek. For the first time in years, my steps didn't echo someone else's needs. The sound belonged entirely to me. The call came 2 days later, sharp and urgent, while I was watering the plants on the porch. The phone buzzed so hard against the table that I almost didn't need to look at the name. Mom! The mortgage bounced, Daniel's voice cut through the line, loud and frantic. The bank called me this morning. What's going on? I kept my tone even. It's yours now. Daniel, that's what's going on. I could almost hear the calculations in his head, realizing the safety net he'd relied on for so long had been quietly removed. There was a pause, a stretch of silence where I could almost hear him blinking, trying to make sense of it. What do you mean it's mine? You've always covered part of it. It's been that way for years. I know, I said softly. That's over. His voice rose again, strained, defensive. After everything I've done for you, I helped fix your roof last year. I got you that new phone, I laughed quietly. Not out of cruelty, but from the absurdity of it, the way small gestures suddenly weighed more than decades of sacrifice. Yes, I said. After everything, he exhaled sharply. Kara's furious. You've embarrassed us. It's not fair. Fairness, I said, has never been the problem. Before he could respond, I ended the call. My thumb hovered for a moment over the screen, but there was nothing left to say. The air on the porch felt different afterward, lighter somehow, as if I'd pushed open a window that had been nailed shut for years. I sat down, let the phone rest beside me, and finally breathed all the way out. The sound of cicadas swelled in the trees, steady and unbothered, like the world had decided to move on, and I realized, so had I. He came on a Sunday afternoon, just as the church bells finished echoing down the street. I saw his car pull up from the kitchen window, the same black sedan I'd helped him buy years ago. He parked too quickly, the tires crunching against the gravel. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but his shadow moved across the porch before I could decide. The knock was firm, impatient. Mom. His voice carried the same mix of command and concern he used when he wanted something. I opened the door halfway. He stood there in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, his tie loose. His face was drawn, tired in a way success doesn't hide. You could have told me, he said, about the accounts, the payments, all of it. I met his eyes. You could have come back. He had only just pieced together the change, and the weight of it showed in his stiff posture. He hesitated, glancing toward the porch rail as if the answer might be waiting there. You're taking this the wrong way. It wasn't intentional. What happened at the wedding? We got caught up in things. Schedules. I almost pitied the way he reached for excuses that had no shape. You left me on a bench, Daniel, I said quietly, not by accident, by choice. His mouth opened, then closed again. The wind moved through the trees, soft and restless. It wasn't like that, he said finally, his voice smaller now. We meant to come back. I waited 6 hours. He swallowed hard. The silence stretched between us until it became its own language. That night, I said, steady as the boards beneath my feet, I learned I'd been waiting for years for you to see me. Not as a duty or a habit, but as a person. I'm done waiting. His shoulders dropped. Mom? I stepped back and placed my hand on the door. I'm not angry, I told him, but this is where the waiting ends. Then I closed it. Not a slam, not a shout, just the quiet, solid click of wood meeting frame. On the other side, the world went still. For the first time, the silence belonged entirely to me. Weeks passed quietly, like pages turning in a book I no longer needed to finish. The phone stopped ringing. The house felt different now, lighter, as if it had taken a deep breath with me. A few days later, after confirming all accounts were closed, I decided it was time to plan the future more formally. One bright morning, I took a taxi downtown to meet with Mr. Kessler, the lawyer who had handled Tom's affairs years ago. His office was lined with tall windows that overlooked the harbor, sunlight glinting off the water. He greeted me with the same measured kindness he always had, the kind reserved for clients who carry too much history in their hands. I'd like to make some changes to my will, I said, significant ones. He adjusted his glasses, waiting. I told him everything, how the house would go to my granddaughter Lena, the small savings to her college fund, and a portion of my pension to create a nursing scholarship at Trident College. I wanted something to outlast disappointment, something that gave rather than enabled. Mr. Kessler nodded as he wrote. You're certain? Yes, I said, completely. The pen moved smoothly over the paper, each stroke final but not heavy. When I left, the breeze off the harbor carried the faint scent of jasmine and salt. And for the first time in years, I didn't think of who might be missing from my side. That evening, I sat on the porch as dusk settled over the neighborhood. The light fixture above me, the one Tom had wired himself before Daniel was born, had gone dusty with years of neglect. I wiped it clean, turned the switch, and watched it glow. "This light isn't for waiting anymore," I whispered. "It's for peace." The soft halo spread across the steps, warm and steady, and for once, it felt like enough. It was a Sunday afternoon when I heard the knock, soft, hesitant. Through the screen door, a small figure stood holding a bunch of daisies wrapped in paper. "Hi, Grandma," Lena said, her smile uncertain. "Mom told me you were upset." I opened the door wide. "Come in, sweetheart." She stepped inside, her sneakers leaving faint marks on the old wood floor. I took the flowers and placed them in a glass jar, filling it with water from the tap. "I'm not upset," I said, turning back to her. "Just awake." Lena tilted her head. Her mother had tried to explain some tension at home, though Lena only caught fragments. "Mom said you've been quiet." "I've just been listening to the quiet for once." I poured 2 glasses of sweet tea and set them on the kitchen table. She wrapped both hands around hers, the ice clinking softly. For a moment, she studied me the way children do when they sense something has shifted but can't name it. "You changed the living room," she said, noticing the bare walls where Daniel's photos used to hang. "I did. Needed space for new things." She smiled, small and understanding, and told me about school, her art project, her friend's cat that had kittens. Her voice filled the room easily, and I realized how long it had been since laughter had sounded natural in this house. When we moved to the porch, the evening light spilled gold through the window. Lena pointed to the lamp glowing beside the steps. "You always leave it on." "Yes," I said, watching it flicker gently against the growing dark, "so no one ever has to wait in the dark again." She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. The scent of daisies and sugar lingered in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something simple and steady, like coming home to myself.